The Battle of Cannae. 2,000 years ago, on a dusty plain in southern Italy, a Carthaginian general named Hannibal Barca achieved something so extraordinary that military schools still teach it today. He took a smaller army, faced a Roman force nearly twice his size, and produced what many historians call the most perfect tactical victory in the history of warfare. But here is the question almost no one asks. If Cannae was so brilliant, why did Hannibal lose the Second Punic War? Why did Carthage fall? And why, for the next 20 centuries, did almost every general who tried to copy Hannibal's masterpiece end up in disaster? Today, we are going to explore the untold story of Cannae. Not the battle you have seen in a dozen animated documentaries, but the hidden truth behind it. This is the story of the most dangerous victory in military history, and the strange way it haunted commanders from ancient Rome to the modern age. Let's begin. The year is 216 before the Common Era. Rome is the rising power of the Mediterranean. Carthage, its old rival across the sea, has been searching for a way to break Roman expansion for decades. And one man believes he has the answer. His name is Hannibal, son of Hannibal Barca, raised from childhood to challenge Roman power. Hannibal does something that should have been impossible. He leads an army out of Spain, crosses the snowy peaks of the Alps in winter, and appears in northern Italy like a ghost. The Romans cannot believe it. By the time they react, Hannibal has already won 2 major engagements at the Trebia River and at Lake Trasimene. Rome is shaken. Rome is afraid. And Rome decides to end this once and for all. The Senate raises the largest army the Roman Republic has ever fielded. Roughly 80,000 soldiers. 2 consuls in command, Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. The orders are simple. Find Hannibal, crush him with overwhelming numbers, end the war. They find him near a small town called Cannae, on the plain by the Aufidus River. Hannibal has about 50,000 soldiers, a mix of Africans, Spaniards, and Gauls. He is outnumbered. He is far from home. He has no reinforcements. By every measure of conventional warfare, he should retreat. He does not retreat. He smiles. What happens next is the moment that every military academy on Earth still studies. Hannibal arranges his line in a gentle curve, bulging outward toward the Romans. His weakest troops, the Gauls and Spaniards, stand in the center. His best troops, the African veterans, are on the wings, hidden, waiting. His superior cavalry guards the flanks. The Romans see the bulging center and assume Hannibal has made a beginner's mistake. They charge straight at it, expecting to punch through. And the center does give way, exactly as Hannibal planned. The Roman legions push deeper and deeper, sensing victory. But the Carthaginian line does not break. It bends. Like a bow drawn slowly back, the line curves inward, swallowing the advancing Romans on 3 sides. The African veterans on the wings turn inward. The cavalry, having scattered the Roman horsemen, comes around behind. In a span of just a few hours, the largest Roman army ever assembled finds itself completely surrounded on a piece of flat ground no larger than a few city blocks. The result was catastrophic for Rome. Tens of thousands of soldiers were lost. A consul of Rome fell that day. 80 senators were among the casualties. It was, by some accounts, the worst single day of loss the Roman Republic ever suffered. The road to the city of Rome lay open. Hannibal had achieved what military theorists would later call the perfect battle of annihilation. And here, my friends, is where the real story begins. Because the moment Hannibal won Cannae, he should have won the war. Every assumption of ancient warfare said so. When you destroy your enemy's main army, the enemy surrenders, or negotiates, or, at the very least, panics. That is how wars worked for thousands of years before Hannibal, and for centuries after him. Rome did none of these things. There is a story, perhaps legend, perhaps true, that when news of Cannae reached the Roman Senate, the senators did not weep. They did not flee. They voted to refuse all peace negotiations. They forbade the women of Rome from public mourning. They raised a new army from teenagers, freed slaves, and even prisoners. They declared that anyone who spoke of surrender would be punished as a traitor. Hannibal sent his deputy, Carthalo, to Rome with a list of prisoners and an offer to discuss terms. The Senate refused to even let him enter the city. The message was clear. Rome would not negotiate. Rome would not yield. Rome would absorb any loss and keep fighting. And so Hannibal stood on the plains of Italy, holding the greatest tactical victory in the history of warfare, and slowly began to realize something terrible. He had won the battle. He had not won anything else. There is a famous line attributed to one of Hannibal's own officers, a cavalry commander named Maharbal. After Cannae, Maharbal urged Hannibal to march on Rome immediately. He said, "Give me the cavalry, and within 5 days we will dine on the capital." When Hannibal hesitated, Maharbal supposedly said this: "The gods have not given all gifts to one man. You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but you do not know how to use one." Whether Maharbal actually said those words, we may never know. But the sentiment captures the central paradox of Cannae. The most perfect tactical victory in history produced almost no strategic result. Hannibal spent the next 15 years wandering through Italy, winning smaller engagements, watching his army slowly shrink, unable to take Rome, unable to force a peace, unable to leave. Now here is where it gets really interesting. Because Rome did not just survive Cannae. Rome learned from it. And what Rome learned is something almost no modern history channel talks about. A man stepped forward in the Senate. His name was Quintus Fabius Maximus, and before Cannae, he had been the laughingstock of Rome. Fabius had been appointed dictator earlier in the war, and his strategy had been simple. Do not fight Hannibal. Do not give him the big, decisive battle he wants. Shadow him, harass his supply lines, raid his foragers, but never, ever line up against him on open ground. The Romans had hated this strategy. They called Fabius the delayer, sometimes mockingly, sometimes worse. They wanted glory. They wanted a decisive victory. They removed him from command and gave the army to consuls who promised to crush Hannibal in one great battle. That battle was Cannae. After Cannae, the Romans came back to Fabius, hat in hand. And Fabius, without a word of triumph, simply went back to work. For years, the Roman armies followed his approach. They refused to engage Hannibal in pitched battle. They wore him down. They starved him of supplies. They attacked Carthaginian holdings in Spain. They prepared, slowly and patiently, for the day when they could strike at Carthage itself. And eventually, a young Roman officer who had survived Cannae as a teenager rose to command. His name was Publius Cornelius Scipio, later called Scipio Africanus, one of the most fascinating figures in all of ancient history. Scipio studied Hannibal's methods. He learned the Carthaginians' tactics. But he understood something deeper. He understood that you do not defeat a genius by playing his game. You defeat him by changing the game entirely. In 202 before the Common Era, 14 years after Cannae, Scipio sailed to North Africa. He attacked Carthaginian territory directly. He forced Hannibal to come home and defend his city. And at the Battle of Zama, on Carthaginian soil, Scipio used Hannibal's own techniques against him, combined with superior cavalry, and won the war that Cannae was supposed to have ended. So what is the real lesson of Cannae? This is where I want to share something that you almost never hear in popular history videos. Cannae is not just a battle. It is a kind of curse. Because for the next 2,000 years, military thinkers became obsessed with it. They wanted to recreate it. They wanted to find their own moment of perfect encirclement, their own grand envelopment, their own day when an entire enemy army would simply vanish in a single afternoon. The German general Alfred von Schlieffen, chief of the German General Staff in the early 1900s, wrote an entire book about Cannae. His famous war plan for the First World War was based on the idea of recreating Hannibal's maneuver on a continental scale. The result was the long, grinding stalemate of the Western Front, costing millions of lives, and ending nothing the way Schlieffen had imagined.